Hello, and welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it is to be an alpha male today in this crazy world, how to walk that out. Today's episode is going to be on leadership and leadership traits. Before we get into today's topic, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. We'll roll into the bio. If you want to skip the bio, it should be about 3.5-4 minutes in, and get into the rest of the body of the episode. Who am I? First and foremost, I am a Christian, made in the image of God, my Creator. Strong, dominant, and in control. I make no apologies for that. I don't apologize for what God's made me. You don't have to be a Christian to listen to this episode or listen to this podcast, but know that I am, and that comes out hopefully in everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. A little bit more about history and experience. You know what, guys, I was going to plug in the pre-recorded intro and bio, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go shoot off the hip real quick, because today is about leadership, and I'm going to talk about my background, but maybe in a different way. So if you normally skip the bio and you want to listen to this one, you can. So let's talk about leadership. I grew up at a very early age in the southeastern United States. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, but even before I joined the Marine Corps, I did several years in JROTC, and the name of that course, you know how the courses have titles in school when you go to the guidance council or whatever and select your classes? It was called Leadership, probably like Leadership 1, 2, and 3. I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was entitled Leadership. And ROTC really did teach me a lot about leadership, about leading other people, and it taught me about leadership traits. In fact, it's where I first learned the 14 leadership traits, and I will talk with you about them today. After ROTC, obviously, I joined the Marine Corps, as I already alluded to. Did several combat tours in Iraq, where by God's grace I led men during a war. By God's grace, He got me back in one piece. So I led men there. Let me go back even in high school. I was one of the co-captains of our wrestling team, so some leadership there. I was also, after my combat tours, an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps, which obviously involves some leadership, teaching other men. Those are their lives may depend on. Also served in the LAPD, some regular assignments and some more specialized assignments. After my term in law enforcement, I also served in the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Both in the Marine Corps and in the Army, I was a sergeant, so leadership there, non-commissioned officer, leading men, leading soldiers, leading Marines. I was also a private contractor for the federal government, an agency I won't specify. I've been a professional firearms instructor for a lot of years. FBI certified, NRA certified, other three-letter government agency certified, anything from handgun instruction to advanced weapons instructor, tactics instructing. Taught at one of the largest firearms training academies in the country. Teaching obviously involves leadership. I've done a lot of competition shooting, but not super pertinent to leadership. I have also been a professional hunter and guide, teaching others how to hunt and leading others in a hunting things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've been a professional hunter of things like buffalo and elk and other species, but I am very blessed to say that I have been one. Leading men in the woods, in the wilderness. Also, I've been the commander of a tactical team where our primary job is to stock active shooters in a fairly large metropolitan area. My still current full-time job is as leader of a tactical team to stop active shooters. Obviously there, leadership again. So I guess all in all, more than 20 years of leadership experience in some form or fashion. Even in law enforcement, even if you're not directly in charge of other law enforcement officers, a lot of times people come to you and they're not really violating a law or looking for someone to get arrested. They, a lot of times, just need guidance in a situation. Some leadership there. But hearkening back to that ROTC where I first learned these 14 leadership traits, and I'm kind of saddened that, maybe a lot of people, especially a lot of young men growing up today, don't get leadership training, whether that's formally, a military organization or some other organization, or at home from a good God-fearing father. Perhaps even more sadly, some young men have never cracked open their Bible and saw the ultimate example of leadership in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. True example of leadership, servant leadership, self-sacrifice, sacrificing to the point not only of death, but death on a cross. What a sad state for young men. Now, I don't know that you have to be a leader to be an alpha male. You could be an alpha male in a certain area and not lead other men, but I certainly think that it can be very tangential, and that being alpha male and being a leader are often intertwined. Before we get into the 14 leadership traits, I would like to mind a scripture that I read often. He who rules over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. He shall be like the light of the morning when the sun rises. 2 Samuel 23. Now, the 14 leadership traits obviously made an impact on me because I learned them more than 20 years ago, and I still remember them and their definitions, if not word for word verbatim, almost word for word 20 years later. Still ring true to me. Coincidentally, one of my first examples, I didn't grow up Christian, one of my first examples of a strong, dominant Christian alpha male was one of the men that taught me this, Master Gunnery Sergeant Floyd Gladden. He was an older man at the time, and this is 20 years later. Whether he is dead or alive, I know not. I know that he certainly made an impact on my life. So without further ado, the 14 leadership traits: justice, judgment, dependability, initiative, decisiveness, tact, integrity, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance. Justice, being fair and consistent. Judgment, to consider all facts and make a correct decision. Dependability, always performing in the proper manner. Integrity, being honest, upright, and truthful. Decisiveness, to take swift and firm action. Tact, to deal with others without creating offense. Initiative, to take action without clearly defined orders. Enthusiasm, showing interest and exuberance. Bearing, the way you look, act, and speak. Unselfishness, putting concerns for others first. Courage, to face and overcome fear. Knowledge, understanding gained through experience and study. Loyalty, being faithful. And endurance, to withstand hardship. Now, these are the 14 leadership traits that I learned more than 20 years ago. Now, certainly, just memorizing these and knowing these is helpful, but that alone will not make you a leader. As it is written in James chapter 2, but some will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. Walk it out. Be that alpha male, that good, strong leader. Now, I have had many men in charge of me in my life. I have had some very good examples of leadership, and some, let's just say it plainly, some bad leaders and some bad leadership. This is not the Everyman podcast. This is the Alpha Male podcast. Not all men are leaders. I want to read you something. Leadership may be an inherited trait according to a new study. A new study suggests that leadership skills can be inherited. Researchers at University College London, Harvard, and New York University found that DNA sequence that is passed through one's genes is linked to individual leadership positions. Now, whether that's true or not, you can research that on your own. I'm not giving you that as fact. I'm giving you that as a study that was conducted. It's pretty clear that not all men are leaders, and not all men are good leaders. I don't know that every man is cut out to be a leader. I don't take any pride in that. Whatever I have, I believe, is a gift from my Creator, a gift from God. As it is written, what do I have that I did not first receive? If I have leadership ability, it was given to me by God. Every breath that I take is a gift, and I didn't earn it, and I can't earn it. Everything I have is more than I deserve. So don't take that as a point of pride. I'm just saying, pretty evident that some men are blessed and called to be leaders. That doesn't mean that you can't shape and mold and be used to be a better leader and be forged to be a better leader. There are many versions I've maybe thought of or heard for this quote, but they say that a wise man learns from mistakes, but a fool never learns. Let's talk about a few of these leadership traits. Justice, being fair and consistent. Now obviously, only God and His Son Jesus Christ are perfect. And earthly leaders are not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. We all have people and personalities that we connect with more than others. And you may have favorites. But there's a difference between having favorites and showing favoritism. Remember the verse we started with, the first part of that, he who rules over men must be just. Let us read a few verses from Leviticus 19. You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people, nor shall you take a stand against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. Also, a little bit further on in Leviticus 19. You shall do no injustice in judgment and measurement of length, weight, or volume. You shall have honest scales, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Likewise, justice laid out in judgment in Deuteronomy chapter 1. Then I commanded your judges at that time, saying, hear the cases between your brethren, and judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who is with him. You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid in any man's presence. Justice is an important quality in a leader, being fair and consistent. Now I just looked down and it's 12 minutes in, so we probably won't go through all these leadership traits one by one except for the definitions of them. But like we stopped reading in that verse, you shall not be afraid in any man's presence. Let us talk about courage to face and overcome fear. Hundreds of times in the Bible it says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. You shall not fear. Who wants a cowardly leader? Whatever kind of leader it is, whether it's a military leader, any great military leader, was he a coward? Of anybody with the great after their name, were they a coward? Whether it's a captain of a wrestling team, the leader of a Boy Scout troop, or a military general, do you want a coward? Now after Moses led the children of Israel 40 years in the wilderness, Joshua was to succeed him. Why? Because Joshua, out of the spies sent out to look at the land, when he came back, he was not afraid and said that God would provide that land for them. He had faith. He was not afraid. For that reason he was chosen. And when he was beginning to lead the people, to become a leader, what is written, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide an inheritance in the land which I swore to your fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. And that chapter goes on. I would encourage you to read it. But courage, I don't care what kind of leader it is, I don't care what kind of man it is, courage is a noble and honorable and godly trait. Fear is an emotion that may grasp at a man from time to time, but a real alpha male beats his emotions into submission. Fear is not real. Danger is real. Fear is something you should beat into submission or ignore it. Consider the danger. Beat down your fear and overcome it. You are called to be an overcomer. Transitioning about good leaders. A good leader does not take a leadership position for personal advantage, for personal gain. Good leader, as we see so perfectly illustrated in Jesus Christ, is a servant. Being a leader is an honor and a privilege, and sometimes requires sacrifice. A good leader, in my opinion, doesn't take a position of leadership to drain the men under him or to see what he can get out of it, but what he can give to those under him. He can provide for those under him. As it is written, the lesser is blessed by the greater. Deuteronomy 17, I will set a king over me like all nations that are around me. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. One from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother, but he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of the law in a book, from the one before the priests, the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of the law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right or to the left, that he may prolong his days in his kingdom and his children in the midst of Israel. So I would submit, if you are the kind of person seeking power for personal gain so that you can oppress others, if you're hungry and greedy for power, you shouldn't have it. It is also written, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain, and a laborer is worthy of his wages. And with leadership positions does come some freedom, and that is good, and I think it's okay to enjoy that. Leadership can sometimes seem like a heavy burden. Often you require more. For it is also written, to whom much is given, much will be required. Obviously, you listening to this podcast is not going to make you a great leader. Maybe, by God's grace, He will use it to mold and shape, and I'd be very humbled if this, in some small way. But I would say that no good thing can be done without God or apart from God. So if you want to be a good leader, look to the ultimate God and His physical representation on earth, Jesus Christ. The words of Jesus Christ in the Gospel of Matthew. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, as I alluded to, I am not perfect. I am a very poor substitute, and fall short of the mark of perfection of Jesus Christ. Try to be like Him. And as I alluded to earlier, I am the leader of a tactical team, and I would take a literal bullet for those who serve under me. God's grace, that day hasn't come yet. But sometimes we take metaphorical bullets. Sometimes we take heat, as it is called in common vernacular. Sometimes we bear burdens and injustice so those under us can stand under an umbrella we made for them out of our strength. I hope, alpha males, that you get out there, be strong and dominant and good, God-fearing leaders. Normally I say a bunch of stuff at the end of the podcast, but I won't today, guys. I'll just close with that. I'm not going to ask for anything. Instead, I'm going to replay the 14 leadership traits, because I think they're worth repeating. Thanks, and have a blessed day. Justice, judgment, dependability, initiative, decisiveness, tact, integrity, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance. Justice, being fair and consistent. Judgment, to consider all facts and make a correct decision. Dependability, always performing in the proper manner. Integrity, being honest, upright, and truthful. Decisiveness, to take swift and firm action. Tact, to deal with others without creating offense. Initiative, to take action without clearly defined orders. Enthusiasm, showing interest and exuberance. Bearing, the way you looked, act, and speak. Unselfishness, putting concerns for others first. Courage, to face and overcome fear. Knowledge, understanding gained through experience and study. Loyalty, being faithful. And endurance, to withstand hardship.